Hi everyone and welcome to another episode of Reading in Bed Extracts with me, Amanda Steele. And today I've got an extract from a book called Such Exquisite Calamity, and hopefully I've got the name of the author right here. It's Sydnie Beaupre, and I'll put it up as well so people can find it on Amazon and wherever they want to buy a book. So I'll start with the blurb. Spencer and Cayden have always known they were different from each of their parents. But when Spencer saves Cayden from a stab wound using only her tears and sheer willpower, they find out exactly what they are. The only two of their kind born under a prophecy. Not caster, not familiar, but an impossible combination of both, known as the two, or the lovers. Stumbling through the new world of casters, familiars, and demigods together proves dangerous for the pair, and unwanted enemies arise as emotions between them become more and more complicated. Will Cayden and Spencer be able to find themselves amongst the chaos, or will they succumb to the power of those trying to stop them? And Spencer of my group of friends. But I've been thinking about it a lot recently, and I think I've figured it out. It's because I had no choice in the matter, having been dragged into the group like debris into a black hole. It was inevitable. I like to think it was sheer luck, but something about it has always felt very orchestrated to me. On my first couple of days of high school, it became clear that I was already part of a... And I didn't know what to think. It's not like I chose these people. They chose me. Not to say that they don't mean anything to me, but I didn't exactly see the appeal in me back then. I had low self-esteem from years of bullying. I walked into the halls of Walker High years ago with absolutely no confidence. I feared being judged by my peers for my appearance, which I've been told can come off as either terrifying or cute. I guess being incredibly pale and having eyes that are eerily clear can cause people to categorise one as different. It shouldn't matter at this new school, I told myself, but it did matter. Everywhere I go, it comes up. My mother's eyes were an intense violet in comparison to mine, but she said her eyes were only violet because who she named Spencer Violet before I even came out of her womb, came into her life. She had been so certain I'd have that eye colour that she put it in my middle name. It makes me wonder if her eyes weren't always that colour, if harbouring my body in hers didn't taint her or something. If I'm being honest, I always found myself to resemble an albino rat, not a cute one, but like one of the rats from the old cartoon Pinky and the Brain. I even have a gap between my two front teeth like Pinky, just a small one, but it's a gap nevertheless. One I've always wanted to get corrected. In addition to my appearance, I was also teased because of my parentage. When I started grade school, having skipped kindergarten because I was too smart, I realised that the other children didn't understand our family dynamic at all. It was then when I realised that I wasn't like them, human, or at least not entirely. I mean, my mum was a nurse who was responsible for saving the lives of people every day in the ER, and that was cool, sure. But people readily referred her or feared her before even finding any of that out. The other kids looked at my father as if he couldn't possibly be my biological dad, despite the obvious streak of white in his dark hair and my own near-white hair. I'd always been told that was what tied us together as father and daughter, but when I explained that fact to my peers, they laughed at me. They told me I was making it up and called me a freak. One kid said I must have been my mum's love child with some albino dude, because I apparently didn't look like my dad at all. It wasn't like my parents hadn't warned me that the kids at this school might be mean. They were lower in IQ than me by miles, but these kids saw me as some sort of aberration, something my parents hadn't the foresight to know would happen. They tried to raise me like a normal human, but the differences became laughably noticeable. When I asked my parents why I was so different and why they'd kept that fact from me, It was almost as if they'd never expected me to ask those kinds of questions. I'd seen a lot of human media to know that we want that. And yet my parents weren't prepared to answer me. Even so, they told me the bare minimum, that these kids didn't normally go to school with people like us, but that I was there to learn how to live life as a normal kid, that I should be thankful for the opportunity. I was told that I should just ignore the other kids when they called me a witch, and that I should just keep trying to find my place. I was told I shouldn't ask any more questions because they weren't able to answer them, that they wished they could. I should just accept that my parents knew what was best for me, that they were only restricted my information because they were keeping me safe. I hadn't understood I was in danger or I wasn't a normal human until the bullying began. I was only 6 years old, and my access to other people had been extremely restricted, so the treatment was shocking. It pissed me off. My dad had been in charge of my education until I turned 5, apparently. I couldn't remember anything before that age very well for some reason. But when he started working at the bar, my parents entrusted me to their friend Terry, who taught me how to read, how to write. But at the same time, I had access to books and television shows and the internet. I'd created this idea in my head that we were a normal human family based off the stories I read and the shows I watched. So it makes sense that I quickly realised, thanks to the taunting, that something was off about how I'd been raised. And still, I stood up for myself, or tried to. I told them I could prove that my dad was related to me, that my mum hadn't bewitched him into believing I was his child, because I was his child. That race didn't matter because I was a kid just like them. At recess one day, I took 3 of the kids who had been my biggest bullies off school grounds to prove my point. I brought them to my neighbourhood, to the bar where my dad works at. Inside, many of the patrons looked a lot like me, which I was quick to point out. See, I said, I'm not a freak. Other people are like me too. And look, see those people with the white in their hair? They're the same. They're like my dad. And the other people, they're like my mum. It's cool, right? I took those kids to that bar to prove a point to them so that they'd understand me better. Maybe even accept me, but none of that mattered, because all those kids saw was a bar full of strange-looking people. A few who were so very obviously not human, and they panicked. All they really did was peek their heads through the doorway to scan the room, but they'd made their decision about what they'd seen. Decided that even among the freaks inside the bar, I was different. They didn't make a scene as we walked back to school, not right away. We walked back in silence. Nobody said anything to their parents or any of the teachers about what they'd seen, but I did get in trouble for taking them off school property and suspended for a week. And those kids, they had their memories wiped as far as I know. The next day they'd forgotten about the incident and went back to teasing me like normal. I was horrified that their minds had been played with somehow, but even more scared that mine had probably been erased at least once before. I told nobody that last part. So that's the end of the extract, and hopefully you've enjoyed that and you'll want to buy the book. And if you're on Amazon, and I'll also put the link in the write-up to help you find it. So thanks for listening and tune in next time. Bye everyone.